Hi, I'm Megan Skidmore, and this is the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts, not only in a faith journey, but in all aspects of life. Join me in bringing this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I'm a firm believer that we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with questions and doubts. When we're more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. This month, August of 2023, marks the 1-year anniversary of Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. And simultaneously, we hit 5,000 downloads. I am so excited and appreciative of those who have come on and allowed me to interview them and share their stories, as well as those of you who are listening, downloading, sharing it with friends, subscribing, and leaving reviews. Each of these actions helps this podcast to grow and the messages and stories to spread far and wide. I feel especially grateful because as a podcaster who identifies as a cisgender female, sharing my story as an LGBTQ plus mama of conservative faith, you are amplifying many voices that fall in the marginalized category. So my genuine thanks. I ask you a favor, and that is to subscribe if you have not, share a favorite episode with a friend, and most importantly, take 2 minutes and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. In celebration of this 1-year anniversary and 5,000 downloads, I've extended my podcast giveaway through the end of August. Leave a 5-star review to be entered into a drawing for a $100 gift card that is good at several different restaurants. Go break bread with someone you love. Invite a friend to leave a review, and if their name is drawn, you both win your own gift card. Help me reach my goal of 10,000 downloads by the end of 2023. Link with the info on how to enter is in the show notes or the bio of my Instagram profile. Thank you for being here. Now on to today's episode. Welcome, everybody, to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast. I'm your host, Megan Skidmore, and I am pleased today to share with you through this interview the perspective of a parent whose kiddo identifies as transgender and also, in this case, non-binary. This is a space that is grossly misunderstood. And so I have found the best way to get to know somebody's story is to talk to them, to let them share their story rather than me try to fill in the blanks. So today I have Mell Fraze with me, who lives in California, is the mom of many, and one who identifies as transgender and non-binary. So with that, I want to turn the time over to you, Mell, to introduce yourself. Share a little bit more about your family, your background, where you live, where you grew up, your education perhaps, or your faith of origin, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Absolutely. So I'm born and raised Californian. My family's been in California for a couple generations. I grew up in a mixed faith household. My mom was and still is a very active Scientologist, and my dad was born and raised Christian, explored various Christian faiths, and wound up being a Universalist in belief. And so that was his perspective in raising me, is that I don't care what church you belong to. Mm-hmm. Whatever one is the right one for you is the right one for you. It took me until my mid-teens to really kind of connect with that, as opposed to the stringent Scientology beliefs that my mom raised me with. Mm-hmm. And then when I was an adult, I had really solidly settled into Universalist beliefs. And then I met my husband, and he was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he had no expectations of me joining the church, but he asked if I'd be willing to at least listen. And the exposure I had had up to that point had been from very nuanced members who held a lot of space for other beliefs. And so that, combined with what the church says its doctrine is, I was thinking, okay, maybe this is a church I can find a home in. Mm-hmm. And so I was an active member of the church, endowed in the temple for several years. And then as my eldest child came out as first asexual and then as transgender and non-binary, we found that the church says one thing and often does something else. And for the mental health of my child, both they and I have stopped attending church. So
thank you so much for giving us a framework of your background, your, what I guess we could say shaped you, molded you in specifically your religious or spiritual journey. Well, I believe those are two separate things, but in your spiritual journey, we could say. One of the reasons why I have created this podcast is to normalize discussions, conversations around the asking of questions and allowing doubts in our faith journeys. So if you would, I'd love to dive just a little bit deeper. I would love to hear about those points in your journey where your faith started to pivot. And by that, I mean, which you already mentioned, you alluded to your belief shifting, where you started to come to this realization that your beliefs were not matching with your reality. I really like to focus on what that process is, because for many, it's quite, well, I don't want to fill in the blank. Just share with us what, your experience is.
Well, this is where I find in a lot of ways I differ from a lot of people, because I started off from a universalist perspective, from seeing all the commonality across various religious and spiritual practices around the world. I've had a lifelong love of anthropology and philosophy and all of that. So I came in with a depth and breadth of understanding, thinking that I had found a religious practice that would allow that to continue to grow. And the way I explained it to people early on in my joining the church was I just had to learn a different vocabulary, right? Like I had to learn how to express the things I believed in the language that made sense to members of the church. But nothing about what I believed had changed. Nothing about there being more to divinity than a single white male God. That I didn't have to change to believe that, because the Latter-day Saint faith included a doctrine of Heavenly Mother. So there was divine feminine. I didn't have to change my perspective on Jesus Christ and his role as Savior the way that some people might have to do, because I already had a different perspective. I already saw him more like the Buddha, more like somebody who's saying, here is a way to draw closer to divinity, to draw closer to the divinity within you, the divinity within others, and the divinity that surrounds us. And so it was just learning how to express all those concepts that I held with universalist beliefs in a way that made sense and was comfortable for members of the church. So I was always on the outskirts. I was always pushing the envelope of things anyway. But what it came down to ultimately is the fact that under current church policy, and I specifically choose the word policy rather than doctrine, there is no space allowed for people who do not fit a cisgender heterosexual binary. And in a faith that believes in continuing revelation, in a faith that believes in personal revelation and personal inspiration, I find it absolutely abhorrent that people can hear someone bear their testimony of, this is my personal truth that I have come to through prayer, through study of scripture, and they can hear somebody say, this is my truth, this is my lived experience of who I am as a spiritual being, and then say, nope, I don't believe it. You're wrong. Like, I cannot abide that. And so that was my turning point of, you know what, regardless of the good that I find in the community, that is so damaging to my child and to so many other people to be told your truth is wrong, while teaching you are entitled to personal, individual revelation and inspiration.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you a little bit ago. Mel, first of all, thank you for being open and vulnerable and candid and sharing your firsthand experience. I think that's why I feel so strongly about amplifying these voices, so that others have that opportunity to really hear what is on our hearts as parents, as mama bears, because it is a very unique pathway. And there are concerns that exist for our kiddos that don't exist for others. And so I honor your experience and your journey and your reality. And I say, I hear you. So you shared that you decided to step away.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm curious, before you stepped away,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even currently, share a little bit about what this was like navigating in real time in your faith community, meaning, one of my goals is to work towards creating safe spaces to bring up questions and to allow the doubts and to verbalize them out loud without the shame attached to it, and be able to, cultivate real organic dialogue, not just in our families at home, but especially in our faith communities. I think that is so important. So I would love for you to share a little bit about what it was like for you and your family.
It was hard. I've been an outspoken ally and advocate for quite a while, and have had members of our ward come up and, thank me for speaking up because they didn't feel that they could for whatever reasons, but they have, queer members in their family. They have a transgender grandchild. They have a child who's questioning whatever. And at that point, my own child was still not out publicly.
Okay.
But then as my child did start to come out, church was the very last place that they came out.
Okay.
We homeschooled for many, many years because my children have educational needs that were not being met in the public school system. And so it was during that time while we were homeschooling that we started to have these discussions where my kid was like, Mom, I'm not like the kids at church. I'm different and I don't get it, and just struggling. And I had already done the big shift in terms of not just acceptance of LGBTQIA individuals and their lived experiences, but affirmation. Because I helped admin a large parenting group on Facebook. We had about 15,000 members at our largest. And we had specifically made a choice, around about 2010, 2012, that we were going to be an inclusive group, that we were going to center marginalized voices, that we were going to include trans parents, both trans women and trans men, and their parenting experiences, and really make space for those voices that are marginalized, for those people who find themselves pushed out of many mainstream parenting groups. And so I had already done like all that internal work, and I'd already started creating an inclusive library for our homeschooling so that my kids could have exposure to concepts. And so we sat down and started having these conversations of me saying, okay, well, this is what this means. How does that feel for you? And trying on these different labels of, this is the label that people use to explain this lived experience. The same way we might use the label ADHD or autistic or dyslexic or whatever. Like, this is the label that kind of encompasses the experience that and does that feel right? And it was overall probably about a 2-3 year process of talking, letting my kids sit with their thoughts and their feelings and ponder it and just really kind of internally assess how they felt about things. And then the first label that they settled on was asexual. That they said, I don't experience any of what people describe about attraction, and we've had further evolving conversations about that. We're now about 4 years into that. And that was the first and most obvious one for them, because marriage and family and all of that is pushed so heavily within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And kids at 12 years old going into the young men and young women's programs are getting these lessons on marriage and family and all this stuff. And my kid was like, I don't want that. That doesn't feel right for me. And and the response that they got back was so unaffirming. It was, oh, don't worry, you'll feel different when you grow up.
I think that's a really, these are all such great points, such great concepts to bring out and lay them right here in the spotlight for a minute. We live in a heteronormative world, but you don't realize it until your life experience opens up another world, which is that there are other ways of connecting with human beings in your sexual identity and in your gender, which is only one part of you. There's so many other facets to the human experience and to our personalities, our beings, who we are on a very fundamental level. I appreciate you bringing up specifically that your kiddo identifies as asexual. I think particularly in a heteronormative world, and this is all over the world, not just our country, that the concept or the idea that you are not interested in sex, we are such a sexualized society. I just don't think it ever entered, their mind that could remotely even be a possibility. And yet there are many who do. Like you said, I'm not, your kiddo said, I'm not like the kids at church. I'm different. I'm struggling. And eventually over time, you said over this 2 to 3 year process, just was able to come to this conclusion that I don't feel that thing that people describe as attraction.
Yeah. And it's when they're 12, right? Like that's the thing that people put out there. I see this a lot in parenting groups and just in conversation with people. Like they'll say they're 12, they're too young to know. Oh, it'll change when they grow up. Like it'll change when puberty happens. Any kind of those comments. And I look back at my own childhood, and it's like, I knew. And we never question it. If it's a cisgender heterosexual child, we never say, oh, you're 12, you're too young to know you're not gay.
Yeah.
We never say, oh, you're 12, you're too young to know that you're trans, that you're not trans, that you're cisgender. We never say that. And
just to educate, I want to define cisgender is an individual who identifies with the sex that they were assigned at birth and the gender that they were assigned at birth, which is determined by genitalia.
Yeah. And I remember like me as a kid and a young teenager being so frustrated by adults who would not listen to me speak my lived experiences and accept that was my real, valid, truthful lived experience. As an adult now, I can reflect back on things and realize that I have a different perspective as an adult now, but it didn't change the truthfulness of what I was experiencing in the moment. And so I've always tried to allow that space for my children of whether or not what they're saying makes sense to me or sounds true to me or whatever. It is the truthfulness of what they're experiencing. They are expressing their lived experience and it is true for them.
Right. I appreciate what you said, that when you were a kid, you just know. And I am the same way. I remember having a crush in kindergarten. I was 5, and that's kind of funny to me now as an adult, but I remember that. And the only difference is, I think I fell in the heteronormative bracket, and there wasn't a reason for I don't even remember if I said anything to my mom. I might have, but there would have been no reason for her to say, "Are you sure?" No. No, that's not right. No, that's not okay. Or I don't know about that. Right. Because straight kids don't get questioned about their orientation because it's part of the normative. So I'm hoping to broaden perspectives and insights and educate folks of, pertaining to these different experiences.
Well, and one of the things that my kid shared with me that was really interesting is that they tried, right? Like as their same aged peers were starting to have crushes and talk about crushes, maybe like 8 years old, like they tried, right? Like they tried it on for size of like, well, this person's nice to me. And, we share some similar interests. So maybe that's a crush. And like even going so far as to confess a crush to this kid. But then as they got older and reflecting back on that, they're like, it wasn't what other people experience as a crush. It was like an analytical thought process of like, well, people say this is what it's supposed to be like.
Okay.
This must be, kind of a thing. Like even younger, right? Like even before they came to me with questions, they were realizing these differences and trying to figure out where they fit in the norm. And so then being asexual in some ways makes things a little bit more difficult, because when you don't relate to attraction to anyone of any gender, then gender becomes very different.
Probably
right?
pretty foreign.
Because a lot of people experience gender in relation to other people's gender.
Okay.
And so if you're already in this place of like not beingness, right? Of not experiencing, then it's like, well, what about the rest of me? And I've never raised my children with a strict gender binary. It's like, wear whatever clothes you want. If you want to wear quote unquote girls' clothes, fine. If you want to wear quote unquote boys' clothes, fine. Wear whatever's comfortable for you, for your body. Part of that comes from we have a lot of sensory issues with texture of fabrics, with lengths of sleeves, lengths of shorts, tightness of pants, all these kinds of things. So it's like, I don't care what section of the store the clothes come from. I want you to feel comfortable. And, so already like we're outside that binary, and it's just okay. And it's just normal. And so this development of like, well, what is my gender for my child hit in puberty? And a lot of people bring up the whole, well, it's not like that it's a contagion or it's peer pressure, all these things. If a kid doesn't realize their transness until they're a teenager, right? And my response to that is, well, when you're non-binary, it doesn't really necessarily become apparent until puberty hits, right?
Yeah.
Because all little kids, aside from genitalia, have very similar bodies, are allowed generally similar interests, can wear similar clothes, and it's no big deal. So if you're not in, and not to say that kids can't realize they're non-binary younger, some do, but it seems to be more commonly that it's the children who are on the very binary ends of the trans spectrum, or the very binary ends of gender presentation, I should say, that realize younger where they fall.
So you mentioned that you never really raised your kiddos in a binary type way. And by that, just to be clear, in case there are listeners that don't understand, meaning you have to do, dress, be, say, be interested in only things for this gender and not this gender, right?
Right. Absolutely.
You left it pretty much up to your kiddos. I'm curious, what do you attribute that to?
A lot of it comes from being very firmly rooted in the principle of bodily autonomy. No one gets to say what you do with your body except you. And some of it comes from my own experiences. Even though I am a cisgender woman, as a teenager, I wanted to shave my head. I shaved my head. As an adult, I've had buzz cuts. I currently have like a very significant undercut to my hair. I've also had my hair down to the middle of my back, and I've gone through
Yeah.
periods of preferring to wear men's pants because they have much better pockets than women's pants, and I've gone through periods of preferring very hyper feminine styles. Like, because my gender isn't about what I wear or how I cut my hair or whether I prefer to play with dolls or climb trees or whatever. Like, none of that makes me who
Mhm.
I am. It's just how I'm choosing to interact with the world. And
Yeah.
so giving my children the freedom of saying, no, I don't want a haircut. Or, one of my boys, when he was a toddler, absolutely adored everything pink and sparkly and rainbow and stuff like that. And he preferred to wear Hello Kitty hand-me-downs from
Mhm.
his sisters. One of his favorite pairs of shoes was pink and rainbow
Sure.
Hello Kitty
Sure.
shoes.
Uh-huh.
And to me, it's like, that doesn't mean anything other than he likes it. Let him wear it without judgment, without labels. There was no, is my kid gay? Is my kid trans? No, he was just my son. And he liked the sparkly pink rainbow Hello Kitty shoes.
Yeah.
And I think people worry too much about how a child is presenting themselves,
Right.
which is also on the flip side. Like, if a child is saying, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, like, absolutely 100% respect that. But
Yeah.
also, some boys just like to wear pink. Some boys just like to wear rainbows and glitters.
Right. And
Some
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 who
girls want to wear cargo
lack. Yeah.
shorts,
Yeah.
it, like, none of that means that somebody has a particular sexual orientation or gender identity.
Right.
And so to me, it was like, people say, well, let kids be kids. That's what I did. I let
Right.
my kids just be kids and be themselves without any rule of, you have this external genitalia, therefore you are a boy or girl.
Right.
Therefore, you must wear dresses, like these colors, play with these toys, or wear
Mhm.
a shirt and tie to church and like these colors and play with these toys. Like, it just, that never made sense to me. Let kids be interested in what they're interested in.
And it strikes me as you're chatting, as you're sharing, that it's really an expression of their creativity on a very their innate identity on that type of a level. It's their creativity. It's it's a manifestation of interests. And I would agree with you. I think it's almost knee jerk for parents, especially when kids are younger or growing up, to worry about what others think. And a lot of that is based in just social norms that have been passed down. You're talking about your experience growing up, and there were times when you buzzed your hair. There were times when you had long hair. There were times when you wore this outfit that maybe would be more for a woman or girl, I should say, and this outfit that would be maybe for boy or a man. One thing that's really helped me kind of better wrap my brain around this concept of gender is to use this idea of masculine energy versus
Mm-hmm.
feminine energy. And that's what I see you describing, right? We all have both. We
Mm-hmm.
know that, right? And some just may have more of one than another, and it doesn't have to mean anything. It can just be, okay, this person is drawn to X, Y, and Z that perhaps is more related to masculine energy, or what we've assigned in societal constructs to be something that's a masculine energy, versus sometimes this person may be attracted to things that are associated with feminine energy, but less so.
Right. Well, and the thing too, I think people get stuck in is this idea that it's static, that it doesn't change. And it goes to just the general human nature of wanting things to be easily defined and easily categorized.
Right.
And the truth is that human sexuality, human gender, both in terms of identity and presentation, are both fluid, right? Even for an individual who very much falls into a cisgender heterosexual identity, if they really are introspective about their lifelong experiences, will find that there are some degrees of fluctuation, and that can be for any number of reasons, whether it has to do with, the physical condition of their body, whether it's illness, whether it's pregnancy, infertility, any of these things that affect us can affect our experience of our gender and sexuality. And some people just are more fluid.
Thanks for listening to my interview with Mell Fraze. Subscribe and follow to be notified first when part 2 publishes in episode 58, where Mell continues to share her unique journey and specifically her experience and thoughts surrounding gender and sexuality and the degrees of fluctuation that can be due to any number of reasons, such as physical condition of the body, whether it's illness, pregnancy, infertility, so on. Many of these things that affect us can affect our experience of our gender and sexuality. Don't forget to enter my podcast giveaway for a $100 gift card and invite a friend to leave a review as well. Link to enter and to the Google Doc is in the show notes or in the bio of my Instagram profile. Come join me in Hopeful Spaces, a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, which is sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. Hopeful Spaces is a monthly parent, caregiver, and ally support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. To join is free. Simply send an email to chc@dallashopecharities.org. Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com, where you can find this podcast as well as additional free resources. Check the podcast show notes on any platform for links to sources cited. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more and to send me a DM. To help the podcast grow, please follow, rate, and review, as well as share it with a friend. Beyond the Shadow of Doubt is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is a part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com/podcast network. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Thanks for being here. Until next time.